Hey guys, it's Sola, and we're going to be going back and revisiting some new filters today, some of the more useful ones again. A quick tip I've not explained yet, but if you hold R or just press R, you get this little interactive spinny thing, and this is really cool for rotating your canvas and just having a look at your picture from different angles. And sometimes you might want to flip it around to check composition, and it's especially when you're painting, your hand has a natural curve. Like for right-handers, it's a lot easier to paint this way than it would be to paint a line around this side. So what I usually do is I rotate the whole canvas around. Hold spacebar to move your canvas, and then I would paint that side as well. Say I wanted to paint, if I select brush here, if I wanted to try painting like a line around here, it's a lot easier to paint this kind of angle for a right-hander than it is to do something like that. As you can see there, I've kind of screwed up. So useful tip to know, and then you can press R and go to reset view up there. Okay, so let's carry on going down the filters. So I'm going to duplicate our layer here, so we have one to play with. Now we did the blurs yesterday, but there's also the blur gallery, which has some pretty cool kind of effects. We're going to try tilt shift here. Now tilt shift is kind of like the filter on Instagram, and what it does is within this area we can increase or decrease our blur. In this case we're kind of like doing the opposite, so on this fall off we're going to get more and more blurred, and you can rotate this around. So again, if you've used Instagram before, you'll probably recognize this kind of effect, and we can create multiple fields. And if you, I believe if you hit delete, you can get rid of it. Click on this one, and yeah, just basically as things fall off, things get more blurred, and it's a kind of cool way. If we come here, we can rotate it, and it's a cool way. I'm going to try and line it up with the lines here. It's a cool way of adding some like fake depth of field. Again, in if you have a composition that works like this, it's actually really useful. So let's say I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to come into our main image, going to give it a second to think about it, and come on, this is actually a big image. I'm on it at 33%, so it's taking a little while. And then I could go in and maybe like paint out the area around here, so where I don't want the effect to be at all. And then we have the kind of like, you know, fall off depth of field down here. This looks really nice. Up here as well, you're getting this like incremental levels of blur, and so it's really cool for adding like more customized blurs if you don't feel that the lens blur filter is quite that intuitive. It's a good way to kind of do stuff like that. And there's different ones as well. You also have the field blur. If I just show you that one real quick, and on this one you can place custom fields. So let's say this area we want to be really blown out, and then you can come here, and just like the puppet warp tool, you can place these points, and by dialing this down you have the effect less pronounced, and then you can move where the effect starts, and then it will kind of fall off between these fields. And so if I wanted to make this corner really, and then maybe like this one in between not quite as much, like just slightly blurred out, and Photoshop is going to do its best to, you know, let's just say this area is not that interesting to me, but this one is, so I'm going to like move that down to like 1 there, and we're going to hit OK again. And you're going to see this is like a really customized depth of field effect. So we've really selected the areas where we wanted the effect to be applied. And yeah, so you have it here. It's like nice. It's like the fall off here is nice. Again, we're getting this nice kind of like fall off depth of field to this side, but yeah, our ball is still really sharp. So really, really useful. So as you can see, there's a blur here. There's the blurs that I showed you in the last lesson, and the blurs in the blur gallery. So there's so many ways to kind of customize the depth of field in After Effects. It's ridiculous. Moving on, we have the distort. Now I find this menu largely useless. We have some effects. Displace is probably the most useful one, but you need to have a Photoshop file saved to do the displacement, which is kind of counterintuitive. I will show you that in the next lesson actually, because I don't have one lined up. All of these are pretty crappy, if I'm honest. Like they do like one-off operations, and if we zoom out here, you can kind of get a preview of what the effect's going to be doing. I hate the fact you can't make this window bigger. It's really, really frustrating. I don't know why they've done that. But you can, like, you know, in this case, turn things into like a circle, which actually in this case looks kind of cool, and make an effect like that. But there's not really any way to customize the effects beyond that. They're really like one-off effects. If we go to like twirl again, similar, kind of cool. You get a preview here of what it's doing. Excuse me. And again, if we hit OK, we're going to get this kind of like twisty effect. But it might be something that's for you, but to be honest, I very rarely find myself using them. And this, you know, sphereize is pretty much exactly what it says, but you can't actually customize where the bulge is. Like if I wanted the bulge to be around the ball, I can't physically do that. It's really frustrating. You can do horizontal and vertical, which basically limits the effect. But again, this is just bulging from the middle, so not a particularly useful effect unless everything is perfectly centered. So I largely ignored the distort menu. There's one I kind of like, which is wave, where you can kind of like add distortion to your picture. And even though there's like a preview here, it's pretty damn useless, to be honest, until you've actually seen it, and you can like randomize the effect a bit if you don't like how it looks. But there's lots of features here to play with, and it's really cool for adding this kind of like subtle rippling. Like I use this if I want to create like an effect, a fake water effect, like a reflection in the water. There's lots of ways in which you can customize this to make things just look slightly wavy. But here, like, I'm going to create like a mega distorted one, which is actually kind of cool. Looks like really glitchy. So you know, there are some uses for these, but I would again be kind of apprehensive of using them too much, and certainly I don't use them that much in my workflow. So take from that what you will. If we move down to noise, I mean, like, I add noise to a lot of things because it adds it's going to be really hard to see because this is encoded on, you know, for YouTube and that. But if I crank this like way higher than I would usually do, and we hit OK, we can see we've added this like tiny layer of noise, and obviously it's really pronounced here. But if I was to drop this off, a subtle bit of noise adds a bit of grit and texture to your picture and makes it feel less CG, especially if you're coming with like a raw render outside of 3D. So I would, I usually add a bit of noise to stuff just to make it feel a bit more real, organic. So yeah, noise is probably one of my more useful tips for using. As for these Dutch and Scratches, Despeckle, Median, all pretty useless in my opinion. If we come to Pixelate, all these are again pretty useless. Mosaic is kind of cool because you can kind of create this like lo-fi. It's the same. I think it's called Mosaic in After Effects, which is exactly the same. But obviously in After Effects you can customize it with video, so you can have things kind of like de-resing, as I like to call it, and then up-resing. So it's actually kind of cool in that way. But I guess if you want to make like 8-bit people and stuff, like this might be the way to go, or just add the kind of like retro feel to your graphics. So I have used that a few times, but again, not too much. The rest of them in there I find pretty useless. Like pointillizer is just like, why? Like who's gonna use this? Like I don't see the use for it whatsoever. It just creates like your picture out of little balls. But yeah, I mean, if anyone has a good use for that, then by all means, but I can't say I do. Whoops. Okay, so moving on. Coming to the end of the lesson, I'm going to try and cap it at 10 minutes because I don't want to drag these on too long. What I'm going to do now is create a new layer and show you the generators, which are actually kind of neat. If we go to render, flame never seems to work for me, but to be honest, I remember when it did work, it's still not particularly great. But picture frame, let's do picture frame for example. And here I have one that I was messing about with earlier. But if you bring, I'm going to bring the angle back down to something less ridiculous. And you have presets here you can save and all that kind of stuff. This here is like the frame that you're using. So if we select like a regular art frame and maybe make it more brown. So somewhere in the kind of orange browny tones. And then, you know, here you have the arrangement of your lines and your bevels. So again, just kind of like play with this slider, see what feels nice. And the size is the size of the frame, obviously. And the margin is how close it is to the edge of picture. So if you want it like right at the edge, you would have this. I'm not sure if you can put it to 0. No, 1 is the minimum. But yeah, kind of, again, like a neat kind of semi-neat effect. As long as you're not going for anything too realistic, it's not going to produce like a perfect wooden frame. But you know, there you go. Like you can always darken this afterwards. If we bring up our levels here, do, you know, something like that, and then go hit Control U and desaturate it a bit. And yeah, I mean, there we have a kind of like black and white frame, which kind of works with this composition in a weird way. And then, you know, you could always add a bit of noise or whatever to dirty it up. So yeah, frame is kind of cool. You can do weird things with it as well, like if you add the like mod distortion to, let's have a look, picture frame. If you go into the advanced and you, I'm not sure, I think you might have to have a high margin. I'm not sure why this is, maybe it's the wrong kind of frame. Yeah, I think your frame has to have like angles, and then you can change the angle like up, and you get these kind of like weird shapes, which again could be kind of neat. I'm not, okay, it's thinking about it, but they can be kind of neat, and you know, create these like weird abstract shapes, which again you can like mess around with, desaturate and all that stuff. Bring that down, and you know, there's creative possibilities with these, like, for sure. Okay, I'm going to create a new empty layer, and I'm going to show you the tree. So the tree is actually kind of cool, because you can create these like generic trees, and there's like a crap load of trees in here that you can choose, and you can choose the light direction. And obviously, like, one tree by itself is not particularly exciting, but what you can do afterwards is like scale this bad boy down, and you know, they don't look like too unrealistic, but if you scale them down to that size, and you've got like duplicate a few of them and like dot them around and stuff, and you can kind of create a brush from these as well. I never got around to showing you how to create brushes, but if I remember to do that, I definitely will. But if I like select these 3 layers and hit Control E, put them on one layer, and then like duplicate that with Control J, you know, start kind of like dotting these around. You know, you've got these little trees. I'm gonna collapse all those onto one layer and then like desaturate them. Anyway, yeah, so you can create like these tiny trees, and obviously there's loads of trees in the database, so that's pretty cool. And last but not least, I'm going to show you the generators. So for these, you have to fill your layer with a color, and I recommend black. So I'm going to hit Shift and Backspace to do a fill on the empty layer. I'm going to select black and hit OK. And then I come to render, and you have lighting effects and lens flares. So lens flare will create a lens flare, surprisingly. And you have 4 different kinds to choose from, and depending on where you put them in the frame, like they kind of move differently. So if I just hit OK, they're not great lens flares, to be honest. I very rarely use these, but it's good to know they're there in case you wanted to create those kind of effects. And yeah, you can like bring them down or whatever. So yeah, kind of cool, and maybe like if you then like blur this out, so I'd like a Gaussian blur, because that's really garish, but you can kind of soften it up, and maybe you can see the creative implications for how you could use that. So yeah, I'm going to show you one last thing, which is the lighting effects, which actually happens to be one of the cooler ones, which is tucked away in Photoshop. So we're going to go lighting effects, and hopefully it will open properly. Yes, okay, so what you can do is you can add lights. So if we click here, add a light, and this is the intensity of the light. So as you move it around, it gets more powerful, and this is like the width. So you can create like spotlights and stuff, and again, like scale the length, scale like where it starts. So if we want like more of a narrow light, come up to here, you can like choose the color of the light, the hotspot, like how far that goes, and you know, play with the exposure and stuff, and yeah, just generally like add a bit of ambiance to your scene. And the best thing is about this is you can then create like another spotlight, and this one up here is like, we've got one down here which I think is like an ambient one. Yeah, so I mean, like, you have them down here and you can just select them. So we're going to select this one here and maybe make this one purple, and we're going to bring the intensity up. And the great thing is the way that they interact with each other. I'm going to just hit the delete on that one. Is the way they interact with each other. You'll see like the colors start to blend, and the hotspot, if we increase that, and the exposure, and you can create some really nice like effects in terms of the way these lights blend. As you can see in the middle here, we've got some nice gradation going. So if I just hit OK here, and it's really nice for creating like really nice you know, just like different color lights effect, and just combining lights. I usually throw like 2 or 3 on, and you can then end up using this as like a color overlay or something, color, or like a color dodge, and just adding like a subtle bit of color to your scene. So I'm going to call it there because we're hitting 17 minutes. I apologize if today was a bit long, but there's a lot to get through. And yeah, this is probably going to end up being split over 3 or 4 lessons, I guess, because there's a lot of filters that I do use. But hopefully I've managed to point you away from some of the more time useless ones that will be wasting your time, like basically everything in the distort menu. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.